Today's topic of discussion, modifications. Modifying your car is kind of like, just personalizing it and even just doing things to make it better in general. So there's so many things that you can do as far as modifications go, but there are barely any modifications that actually will add value to your car. Most modifications you do will probably actually reduce the value of the car or just make it harder to sell overall. But today I'm going to go through some of the modifications that I believe will help increase the value of your car and some suggestions that you can use as far as, if you have a modded car and you want to sell it. So before we even get started, in the comments down below, I want you guys to answer the question. Would you buy a modded car or would you rather buy a stock car? For me, I like to buy my cars bone stock. That way I can modify them and pretty much know everything that's been done to them. Because whenever you start getting into many of the aftermarket modifications, there's, a lot of different ways to actually perform those modifications. Whether that's, upgrading bumpers, paint work, even performance stuff. There's so many different ways that different shops and different individuals might install something. And for me, I like to know how everything was put in and how everything was installed. So that's why I like to buy my cars bone stock and do all the modifications on my own. Now let's start with the number one modification. At least for me, I would consider a modification is maintenance. Most cars that you buy, especially enthusiast cars, chances are they are not caught up on preventative maintenance. So whether you consider that a mod or not, I highly recommend doing as much maintenance as you can and try to document all of it. It doesn't matter what kind of car you have. Each car has its own set of issues that are already discovered at this point, where you can go ahead and take care of those preventatively. For example, like BMWs, their cooling systems, Hondas, their timing chains, timing belts, or even their transmissions. Subarus with their head gaskets that go out just like the valve cover gaskets on BMWs. I know that's not entirely true, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. So always I suggest doing maintenance before you do any kind of modifications. Maintenance is always key, because what's the point of having a good looking modified car if it's just stuck at a shop or if it's stuck on the side of the road? So better off getting all the maintenance taken care of first. Do as much preventative stuff as you can before you start doing the actual cosmetic and performance modifications. And we'll just tie that into performance modifications. Most performance modifications you do are going to require you to have your maintenance up to date. Otherwise, you're just going to end up breaking more stuff. So now performance modifications. That is something that is very controversial as far as adding value. Most people, whenever you do performance modifications, they kind of see it as taking away from the value of the car, because chances are it might reduce the life of the powertrain. So chances are you might not really get any kind of value for those performance modifications. There are some that you might. For example, exhaust. A lot of people like having a louder exhaust, especially on sporty cars. So if you get a good quality exhaust, that might actually help increase the value. Now here's the thing. When any modification that I'm talking about today, they all have to be quality. So there's a lot of aftermarket brands that are really not that great of a quality, and in that case, you're not going to get any value for whatever modification you do. So whether you do maintenance or whether you're doing any kind of mod, you want to go with quality parts and you want to try to keep everything documented. That's also very, very important, because documentation is always key. So whether that's pictures, receipts, which is always good to have. So continuing on with performance modifications. There's a lot of performance modifications that you can do that are easily reversible. And that's probably the best way to go if you're planning on, reselling your car in the future. For me, most of my cars, I never resell them. So for any modification I do, I don't really have to think twice whether, I have to be able to make it reversible or not, even though I usually still do that. So that's something that you really want to consider. Now for cosmetic mods, there's a lot of different ways you can go about doing it. But like I said before, quality and brand is the key to the game. So you want to make sure that you're using quality components. One good rule of thumb is to try to stick with the product line that was originally offered. For example, whenever you buy BMWs or any of the European cars for that matter, you usually have base models, sport package, and whatnot. So you can try to stick with that same family and just upgrade to that sport package bumper. A lot of things that a lot of BMW people do is they'll upgrade to the M performance parts, which you can get, like, even if they're replica bumpers, they're still good quality replica bumpers that you can install. And most things with bumpers and stuff like that, the most important part is just the fitment and the quality of the paint job that's done on it. So you want to make sure both of those are very good, otherwise you're going to hurt your resale value more than you would help it. Now, the next thing would be, wheels. So you can always do wheels that change the look of the car, but you want to try to stick with something that's actually going to help the car. A lot of people have the misconception of, changing the wheels, but they don't look at any of the weight of the wheel. They don't look at the type of tires they're putting on or anything like that. So if you put on a heavier wheel, you're actually slowing your car down. And if you put on a crappy tire, you're ruining the handling of the car. So you want to make sure you take all those things into consideration before you go on and complete that modification. Now, other cosmetic mods that you can do would be just respraying your front end. Front end of most cars, when you're doing highway, freeway driving, you're gonna get rock chips and stuff like that. And a good respray will make the car look, a whole lot better, and it will also appeal more to a buyer when you go to resell it. And other things that you can do along with those resprays is to do some kind of paint protection film. So if you bought like a car that's new, like behind me, the F80 is still considered very new. So that's something that I do want to do in the future, is put a paint protection film on it. And that will just help, prevent any rock chips and stuff like that. And that will help increase the resale value. Whether I peel off the paint protection film before I sell it, which I probably won't. Like I said, I don't sell any of my cars. But if I were to, that would be an option. And another thing is lighting. So lighting is a big key component, especially for older cars. Older cars have older technology. The newer technology in lighting is night and day compared to what we used to have. Whether that's LED projectors or just xenon projector HIDs and stuff like that, you want to make sure you're doing it the right way though, because that's one thing that a lot of people mess up on. There's so many people doing HID retrofits and stuff like that, but they're not using quality components and they're not using projectors. So they're just blinding people left and right. And the same thing goes with LEDs. There's so many different types of LEDs. You want to make sure that the beam is still, actually where it should be. You want to make sure everything's pointed correctly and using quality components. Now, one thing that I've really considered doing to all of my cars, but I just can't justify it, is PDR. So PDR is paintless dent removal. And what that, it just says it in its name, is to remove all the dents without having to repaint anything. So over time, especially if you buy a used car, you're gonna see a lot of dings, door dings and stuff like that just bug you. And I personally have a bunch of them on all of our E46s. And even on the F80, there's a pretty bad door ding that I eventually want to get taken out. PDR is a little bit more expensive, and that's something that I have not, played with to learn how to do myself. Maybe I might do that, but that's something that in the long run actually kind of saves you money. Rather than having to repaint it, you can keep the OEM paint and just get the dent removed without having to repaint it. So it might be a little bit expensive off the bat, but if you compare it to having that whole panel resprayed, it is actually going to be worth it. Now, along with PDR, there's a couple of other things that actually help, increase the value of your car, and that would be like a full detail. And I'm not talking about just cleaning the inside and outside of your car. I'm talking about doing a full, correction, paint correction, where you're polishing, compounding, and just bringing that, clear coat back to as glossy as it used to be. And after that, you can also do ceramic coatings and stuff like that. Now, one thing with ceramic coatings, I really don't think you're going to get any value back on that, because that's just something that, it's not really tangible. It's not something that you can see, and a lot of people are just not going to buy into that. So that's something that you might not really, get your value on, but that is something that I would recommend doing after you've done a full paint correction. Now, I know that might not seem like a mod per se, but if you really think about it, it still is, because it is improving the look of the car, and you are just making improvements on the car in general. Now, one area where it can make a huge difference, any kind of modification, would be the interior. So when it comes to interior, you have so many options. There's so many things that you can do, but once again, it just has to be quality stuff. For example, a lot of the older cars, you don't have USB charging, you don't have wireless charging, you don't have any of that. And if you can retrofit it and make it look like it was factory, that's something that a lot of people will appreciate. Now, other things would be options that were available from factory, but they just weren't installed on your car. So that could be like an alarm system, that could be like a heads-up display, it could be a navigation system. Now, when it comes to navigation or even any kind of radio electronics, that's something that you're probably better off going with something that's aftermarket with more options, that's newer than what was available at the time of build. Even for the F80, like the the navigation system that's in there is pretty outdated at this point. And this is a 2015, so there's so many other options out there, even in the aftermarket, that can bring that up to today's date using some kind of Android or even Apple Play and stuff like that. There's a lot of options out there. Just you gotta do your own research to find what's good quality brands for your cars. And now with YouTube, I mean, honestly, any car that you have, there's gonna be videos discussing any kind of options or any kind of, retrofits that are available as far as any kind of electronics are concerned. Going along with the interior, there's other modifications you can do, as in changing out the seats. If you had fabric, you can put leather seats. If you had base model seats, you can put sport seats. You can even retrofit seats from newer cars. BMWs are very good about that, where you can, depin the harnesses and make things work. You can add options as well, as far as like heated seats and stuff like that. These modifications are very tedious because, it's a lot of, researching and a lot of wiring and stuff like that. But it's something that you can enjoy, and that's something that a new owner might appreciate. But like I said, once again, you're not going to get the value back as far as how much time and money you spend. But it will help increase it a little bit. To the right buyer, that is. Another thing that you can do that's maybe not really considered a modification is just fixing all of the little issues. Whether that's sagging headliner, peeling trim, stuff like that, you can fix all of those issues, do it yourself or get it reupholstered, whatever you like to do. And that's something that you will even enjoy during your ownership of the vehicle. One of the best interior mods that I've done is steering wheels. So on all of the E46s, we put on M3 steering wheels with different types of material, and that's probably the best bang for your buck upgrade as far as the interior is concerned, because it's something that's very easy to do, and it's something that actually does, you actually feel an improvement as soon as you put it on. And whenever you go back to a standard car that had the standard steering wheel, there's a huge difference. So that's something that is a great investment for you, because you can also sell the steering wheel, put it back to stock if you ever wanted to do that. And that's something that ties into my next point. A lot of modifications, like I said, you're not gonna get your full value for your time and money that you put into it. But I like to stick with stuff that's reversible, because that's one option that you always have. When you are done with your car, whenever you're tired of it and you're trying to sell it, you can try to take off as much of the things that you did if you have the stock component still. Anything that's reversible, like intakes, exhaust, even suspension, wheels, stuff like that, you can just take it off the car, put it back to stock, and just sell those modifications separately on your local classifieds, Facebook Marketplace, stuff like that. And you'll probably get more money back on those items that you actually spent initially, rather than trying to sell it on the car. But that's not to say, there's a buyer for everything. And I always suggest putting your car up the way that you have it modified. Put it up first, and put something that's reasonable, what you want to get out of it, because you're definitely not going to get all the money that you put into it, but you might get somewhere close, because somebody might have the same taste as you as far as modifications are concerned, and it might work out perfectly for them, and it's a win-win situation at that point. Now I feel like one mod that actually does probably have the most value added would be suspension stuff. So whenever you do suspension upgrades, even whether it's just lowering or coilover conversions, stuff like that, if you go with a quality brand and you have the documentation to back it up, chances are you will get a good amount of return on that investment. It also depends on how much you've driven on it. So like, let's say if you bought a coilover kit, like a KW V3 coilover, and you installed it on your car, but then you drove 40,000 miles on that suspension, it's not really that much value left in it. So in that regard, you're kind of screwed. But let's say you bought the KW V3s, you drove on them for 6 to 8 months, and then you just got tired of the car and you were to resell it. You might get a pretty good amount back. I wouldn't expect the full return, obviously. You're definitely not gonna get any labor costs for installation of the coilovers, but just for the part itself, you might get some money back as added value on your vehicle. So quick little recap, mods that might add some value. Maintenance, always do that first. Suspension, reversible performance modifications like exhaust, intake, stuff like that. Stuff that doesn't really do any damage to the engine or transmission. Wheels and tires, that's iffy, but that's also, if it makes the car look better, why not? Interior modifications, that would be retrofits or just upgrades in general. Cosmetic upgrades that are good fitment, good paint, and just good quality in general. And PDR, detailing, stuff that just makes the car look a lot better. It'll also help it sell a lot quicker, and you might get a little bit more money for it when you go to resell it. So that's pretty much it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, but let me know down below, would you rather buy a stock car or would you rather buy a tastefully modified car? And how many of you guys are like me, where once you modify your car, you don't end up selling them? So you just have a whole collection of just cars that once you get tired of, you can move on to the next one and modify that one. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in our next video.